Most people don't realize their hip flexors don't need to be stretched if you want to fix tightness in them. A better solution in the long term, but also often in the short term, involves restoring the mobility tight hip flexors will limit, and then training the hip flexors through a full range of motion. What I mean by this is that tight hip flexors will pull the pelvis forward into a position of, well, obviously, hip flexion. What this does over time is it limits our ability to move into a position of hip extension where the leg can come effectively underneath us and the pelvis rotates relatively back. So yes, you could stretch out your hip flexors in a position of hip extension, but that does not do the same thing as training your hip extensor muscles to genuinely move you through that end range of hip extension and owning that. Two of my favorite exercises to do that would be first, the supported single leg press down. Basically, just taking a foam roller underneath your leg, hanging off of a table or a firm surface. Keep one knee pointing at the ceiling, and with the active leg, press it down into that roller, making sure that your low back stays nice and flat and relaxed. You'll feel your hamstrings work to drive you to an end range of hip extension. And this single leg wall bridge is also really effective because it will teach your foot how to work with your hip to create extension as it should with every single step that we take. All you want to do is gently apply pressure into the wall with these points of contact in your foot. And then you want to gently peel your spine off of the ground and do a posterior pelvic tilt, about 1 or 2 vertebrae with each single breath that you take. After about 5 to 6 breaths, you'll be at an end range and then you can go back down and repeat the process. And then we actually want to train the hip flexors to effectively work through a full length of hip extension to hip flexion. Just because your hip flexors were tight does not mean they were strong. They were actually probably weak because they couldn't effectively work through a full range of motion. Here's my favorite way to do that. Attach a cable strap to the lowest setting on the cable machine and get a bench on an inclined position like this. Walk far enough forward and get some slack on that cable so that way when you're in that resting in position, you're not so far back to the point where your back arches excessively, but you do feel like you're kind of stretched through your hip flexor. Now support yourself on that bench and all you're gonna do is pull that leg straight up, stopping at the point where if you were to go any higher, you have to crunch under because that again is your end range. So you wanna go through that full range of hip extension all the way through hip flexion.